Superb, and we're live. Max, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I know it must be a rough day for you because it's the aftermath of Easter, which is a very, very big deal in Ghana where you are. Right or wrong?
You're absolutely right. But thank you for having me. It's good to be on for this chat.
Absolutely. Now, I try and keep the introductions to these programs. This is my tete a tete series where I have kind of as much as I can, kind of in depth conversations with people who can shed light on current issues. Um, I try and keep the introduction short. This one's a little bit longer than usual. So, Max, audience, bear with me while I set up the conversation that we are about to have. So, where are we? Okay. The President of the United States of America caused a furore when, at a business roundtable meeting attended by leading firms in the USA, including big ones like Apple and Amazon, he referenced the New World Order. He said, "We are at an inflection point, I believe, in the world economy. Not just in the world economy, but in the world, which occurs every 3 or 4 generations. Now," said Mr. Biden, "is a time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order, and we have got to lead it, and we have got to unite the rest of the world in delivering it." Now, by using the phrase New World Order, he referenced the so called conspiracy theory that a secretive totalitarian cabal of world governments are attempting to establish an international order that would see the people suppressed under a globalist regime. The common theme is that a secretive elite, for example, the so called quote unquote Illuminati, is conspiring to rule the world through an authoritarian one world government which would replace sovereign nation states. So much for the much discussed conspiracy theory. What is factual, however, is that facilitated by institutions like the World Economic Forum and its ability to marshal the leading lights of finance, banking, industry, science, tech, and medicine, the world's capacity for moving in lockstep, regardless of country, has hugely expanded. The globalized medical response to the COVID pandemic and the resulting advances in digital surveillance and control of mandates have shown a world far more advanced in working together as if being of one state. Now, in Africa, the pandemic led to a reduction of GDP of from 3 to 6% on a continent already sorely challenged, winding up with an increase of the extremely poor by 40 million. Experts predict climate change induced disasters, including floods and pestilence, will increase. Some are saying that Africa could see her GDP decline by up to 30% by 2050. Now, whatever the actual figures, something has to be done, and it will surely fall on the shoulders of the middle, professional, and political classes to lead the way out of these challenges. I'm joined by entrepreneur, business analyst. I call him a social philosopher. He calls himself a humanist, Max Vardon, currently resident in Ghana and himself a Ghanaian, to chew over some basic points around the conundrum of what Africa should do against this terrible backdrop. I'm asking the basic question: do the political and professional classes in Africa have any awareness of the thinking abroad about the New World Order? And if not, how do they plan to raise Africa up? Max, thanks so much for joining us. Now, I hope people kept a grip of that narrative. It was rather long, but we had to set up the conversation. And this is something that, to be responsible as a journalist, I'd like to stay fairly nuanced on. There is a new world order, which is a so-called conspiracy theory. However, there is also the Great Reset, which is wildly trailed around the world, which is coming from the World Economic Forum, which is very much a matter of fact. There is also the United Nations Agenda 21, again, another matter of fact. But these three things seem to work together. So let's unpack the part people like you, Max, because I'm looking to you as a member of those professional, middle class, um, uh, 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 eh, I, I nearly said the word elites, but you might take offense if I was to use that word. Um, but one of the people who should be thinking about what Africa and Africans can do. So, Max, thank you so much, and a great welcome. What's your first thought about the people's awareness about this thing called the New World Order?
I doubt if very many people have given it much thought. Now, let's give it a bit of historical context,
Good.
which is this: throughout the ages, there
Mhm,
have been, at least in recorded history, there have been
mhm,
a number of endeavors to
mhm,
establish global empires, from
mhm,
Alexander the Great,
mhm,
through the Napoleon,
mhm,
and before that, even the Roman Empire.
mhm,
And these were initiatives because mankind has these ideas of grandeur that they have
mhm,
to control as much territory as possible.
mhm,
The interesting thing is that if you talk to many students of history, they will say that the Roman Empire exists today in the form of the American Empire.
mhm,
It is a kind of reincarnation of the Roman Empire. And you just have to look at the architecture to
mhm,
see the similarities. You have to consider
mhm,
their use of the Senate and so on
mhm,
in their governance structures.
mhm,
So the endeavor to establish a global empire is not
mhm,
new. It
mhm,
has been essayed before.
mhm,
However, however, never before in the history of mankind, so far as we know,
mhm,
has there been the technology to enable that kind of control to be established where you have a one world government that is able to control the lives of all citizens around the globe. Never before.
mhm,
And so we live in a time of crisis, in the Greek sense of the word, being opportunities for great change.
mhm,
And there are people who are apparently determined to take advantage of these new emerging technologies to make those changes happen. So you ask the question, how aware are people of the New World Order? Well, very few people I know have any idea. And those who do, who have heard the phrase New World Order, have not thought about it. They think it's some kind of benevolent projection that some philanthropists are making. But I would make the point that this is not a new a phrase. I mentioned at one point that if you take the humble US dollar bill, the $1 bill,
yes,
and you turn it over,
yes,
you will see under the
yes,
truncated pyramid,
yes,
there's the Latin phrase, novus
yes,
ordo seclorum,
yes,
novus ordo seclorum, which
yes,
translates into New World Order. And this idea, New World Order, has been in circulation in the fundamental currency of the US since 1935. Since 1935. Now, again, we have to understand that the US dollar bill, which many people associate with the United States of America, naturally, and assume that it is the property of the United States of America, that it is issued by the US Treasury. Many people make these assumptions and they will be completely wrong.
Right.
because the owners of the US dollar bill are a private company, a private entity that in 1913 managed to persuade the president of the day to give them the monopoly to print the currency for the United States of America, the
Would
US
that be
dollar.
the Federal Reserve?
It is a Federal Reserve system, yes, which, like I said, is owned by private interests.
Right.
So these are the people who are advertising this idea of a new world order. And
Can it,
go on.
no. Sorry. Finish your statement.
And through the fact that today the dollar is the de facto reserve currency for the world, and through the fact that these same people or group of people also control the central banks of the world through the Bank for International Settlements, okay, we have a nexus of unprecedented financial and economic and therefore political control, which is gathered in the hands of a very, very few nameless, I should say, in the sense that they're not in the public domain visibly, unelected people who are therefore endeavoring to fashion the world after the image that they would like.
Let me just interrupt for a moment. I'm sharing the screen, which I hope that you can see.
Yes, I can.
And of course, this is the reverse side of the
US dollar.
$1 US bill.
Yes.
Novus Ordo Seclorum. It translates in the Latin as New Order of the Ages, which
Yeah.
literally means a new order has begun. And
Mhm.
Annuit Coeptis, again from the Latin, says that God favors our undertaking. So this is something which, whilst being called a conspiracy theory, is an idea which, as Max has said, um, carries quite a lot of wealth and is even underpinned, in their opinion, by religiosity and indeed the will of God.
Well,
So I'm going to stop
Ted,
sharing the
Ted,
page now.
Ted, again, you see, these we make certain assumptions without foundation.
Hmm,
And yes, the dollar bill talks about annuit coeptis, and it
mhm,
suggests it is the will of God. Yeah,
mhm,
that they are pursuing the will of God.
mhm,
But let us not forget that ancient Rome,
mhm.
okay, was not monotheistic. They had numerous gods. So the question has to be asked when they say the will of God,
Which
which
God are they
God
talking about?
exactly are they talking about? Because
Very
that is
good.
not specified.
Very good. Max, I mean,
That
we
is not
could be here
specified.
all night if we wanted to go down each one of these rabbit holes. But I
Mm,
thank you, greatly for pointing them out, flagging them up, because it suggests the issues that people need to go and drill down into and do their
absolutely.
own research over.
Absolutely.
Now, if, as you suggest, the sense I'm getting, that amongst your fellows, people like you who are all professionally trained, they've been to elite, fee-paying schools when they were younger. They've been to elite universities for their first, second. Some of them have 3 degrees. Um,
Yes.
they're not conscious of what's going on. What is what are they doing? Is it that Africa, where they live, where they reside, where their principal responsibilities are, has got so many fires raging around them that they spend their whole lives putting out these fires, trying to survive those fires, and so don't have the time to look above the horizon to see what is coming down what the Americans would call the turnpike.
Mm. Well, you have a small point there in that, yes, there are many economic and socioeconomic and technology and all kinds of fires raging in Africa in terms of unfinished business that needs to be addressed. But we are all in it. And I probably have more fires to fight than most. So it's not the existence of the fires that's causing people to not have the awareness. I think it is something else. And I think it is that regardless of the fact that, we grew up in Africa and so on, our educational systems and structures are inherited from our former colonial masters. And they instituted these structures in such a way as to continue to influence our thought patterns and our beliefs and so on long after they left our shores. So, what is happening is that, as you point out, many in the middle classes and so on have gone abroad for education, they've gone to fee paying institutions and so on. But the narratives that we are exposed to are extremely, extraordinarily consistent, whether we are here in Africa or in the US or in Belgium or the UK and so on. And it's a very Eurocentric narrative. Now, it takes a person who is dissatisfied and is curious to ask questions about the status quo. Is this what is this acceptable? Are living conditions really the best that we can do? What prevents us from moving forward, and so on?
Well,
Now,
my God, I mean, then in the case of Africa, you couldn't have more ammunition because there is so much dissatisfaction. Even the middle classes are struggling with the turn of events, particularly post COVID and so on. Um,
yes,
Let alone the ordinary people who are really, really, really struggling across the continent. So we got the fuel to make us want to think outside the box. Why aren't we thinking outside the box?
we've we've got the fuel to make us think. Yes, outside the box is a different proposition. Because much of our thinking is boxed in by the educational opportunities we have, by the mentorship and the leadership and the role models that we are exposed to. And apart from very few Pan Africanists who interrogated the issue of colonialism and neo-colonialism and so on, them, Kwame Nkrumah, Marcus Garvey, Thomas Sankara, and so on, most of whom were bumped off for their troubles. Apart from the very few people like this, most of us have really just succumbed to the endeavor to just keep, a roof over our heads. And we spend all our energies in doing that or in keeping up with the Joneses. And we don't think beyond the boxes that we have been encouraged to stay in.
Okay, so the issue is a mindset which provides agency to the owner of the mind, and you're saying
Absolutely.
that basically, that is the deficit we have. So, who then is driving the affairs? If we don't have the mindset to grasp the nettle and start to change the direction of this super tanker that is Africa, or in your
Mhm.
case, say Ghana,
Yeah.
who then is driving that ship of state? Who's driving it?
Well, this is the difficulty we have. In effect, nobody is driving the ship of state. It's merely moving along in the momentum that was imparted to the country post Kwame Nkrumah when we had a series of governments that were shaped by primarily Western forces. We mustn't forget that when Nkrumah was deposed, yeah, the Americans came along and they lent the country money to be able to buy American goods. And the thought is just completely ludicrous, but this is essentially what we have been doing since the Bretton Woods institutions. They come, they lend us money so that we can buy their expertise, buy their goods, and so on and so forth. And we stay on the merry-go-round. And this is precisely why things do not improve in Africa. Because we are not driving the agenda. We are following the prescriptions that are given to us by external agents, which no matter how much we look up to them as so-called philanthropists and saviors, and so
Driven by their own self-interest.
They have their own interest at heart.
Yes, yes, yes. Max, this is where you earn your onions. What are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you must have looked at this thing. You must have tussled with this problem, as indeed have we all. And
yes.
A point must come when people say that, look, the talk's over. I mean, something has to be done. We have to segue in a new direction. What can be done, in your opinion?
This is the $64 million question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. We have had revolutions, military takeovers, where the armed forces have said something has to be done, and they've taken over. By and large, they haven't had the vision, to see beyond the immediate crisis and to understand that Africa is beset by extra continental forces.
Yes.
And to hope to go it alone is just not going to work. All the visionary leaders in Africa have spoken of the need for unity. Colonel Gaddafi was probably the most outspoken visionary that Africa has had up to 10 or so years ago.
Right.
When he sought to foster greater unity within Africa by promoting a single African currency, backed by gold, his oil, and so on and so forth.
Adina, yes.
Yeah. And he got murdered for having
troubles
to make that suggestion.
How dare he? Yes.
And the rest of Africa sat by. We protested mildly that the UN might the way to go, that the AU should have the opportunity to have dialogue with him and the rebels and so on. So we protested mildly, but we didn't send any armed forces to support his government. We didn't send in people protest the no-fly zone and so on and so forth. And this has been our difficulty. We remain disunited. We remain a club. If you go to the AU, of some 54 leaders who meet every so often to drink wine and discuss the latest. I don't know what they discuss, but if we are to interrogate seriously the issue of African unity, I have to ask the question: since the AU was formed a couple of decades ago, with the idea of bringing together the continent under one leadership, how much endeavor, effort has been put into starting to craft a constitution for the continent? We haven't even started. And what that says is that the mindset is not there. Because, we have leaders in our countries whom we elect, and we forget, once we've elected them, that they are there to serve. They are there to serve the country. Instead, we talk of them and we treat them as though they were demigods. And we praise them to high heaven for doing,
very little
things. I mean, commissioning a water tank in a village 150 miles from the capital. How is that newsworthy in this day and age? A water tank, for Christ's sake. These are things that should be under the mandate of local development, local administrations, and so on. But this is where we are. So, short of physical revolution, we have to then look at the real now of the issue, which is a revolution of mind and spirituality. And unfortunately, it's difficult to do that en masse. Essentially, we have to do it one person at a time and try to build up a critical mass over a period of time.
Mm,
So
mm.
it is going to take a while unless there is some intervention that focuses people's hearts and minds very sharply on the need for change. And it may well be that this crisis we have in Ukraine, the crisis we've just been through of COVID 19 and so on, maybe these are things that will coalesce in a challenge that will get people to realize that we have to be more assertive in defining and controlling our own destinies as
Okay,
Africans.
you see, Max, I have a problem here, and this problem applies to me as much as it does to anybody of a or middle or professional class demographic across the entire continent. Right now,
Yeah.
we have the twin prongs of COVID, which hasn't gone away. It seems to be on a short sabbatical. I'm sure it will come back again very soon and more virulently, no doubt. We have COVID, and then we have the issue of climate change. Now, at the same time, we noticed that while the lockdowns, global lockdowns, were taking place, um,
Mhm.
whereas prior to COVID, 1% of the world um, um, had 44% of the world's wealth. That actually increased to 64% of the world's wealth being held by the top 1% of the world. So
Yeah.
the inequality actually just, ramped up spectacularly.
Yes.
Capitalism, says the World Economic Forum, is dead. The idea of maximizing shareholder returns is what they claim has led to these inequalities that we see. And they are now calling for something called stakeholder capitalism and a public private partnership in which everybody gets involved in the conversation. Now, that is basically a kind of a recital of what the Great Reset is going to be about. The problem is, if people in Africa aren't even conscious or aware, if not at the middle class level, they're not conscious or aware that these are the pressures that are brewing, what chance do we have of being at the table when the conversations are being had? To avoid being in a situation in a year's time when Africa is presented with yet another fait accompli and said, well, this is what we decided you're going to do. And everybody just has to kind of, you know, toe the line. What can be done to G up the middle and the professional classes to live up to their billing? Because one thing African middle and professional classes are very good at, so they're very good at demanding respect. They're very good at profiling and showing
Yeah.
you which university they went to. Not so good, I must say, and kind of mea culpa. I'm taking my share of the blame. Not so good at showing what they have actually achieved with all of those fancy PhDs and so on and so forth that so many of our people have got. Intelligence isn't the issue. What's
Mm.
your answer to that, Max?
We do have a conundrum, Ted. As you said, we like to demand respect, but only from our own societies. When we leave our national borders or the
Mm,
continental borders and we go to more advanced societies, we revert to becoming beggars. We do not show respect for our countrymen, our countries, and we cannot demand respect because we are going as beggars.
hmm
And the risk that we face here in
hmm
Africa is that we will be relegated to becoming hewers of wood and fetchers of water, doing the most menial things that we have historically done under colonialism. And of course, Kwame Nkrumah and others warned against this reversion. So
Can I,
it's,
if I may just briefly kind of interject there, an event
yes,
that's taken place here in the United Kingdom, the Prime Minister Johnson and his Home Secretary, Priti Patel, have signed
yes,
what they're calling a world-beating paradigm shift in the way they deal with migrants, illegal migrants to Europe.
yes,
They've signed a deal with Rwanda, of all places, so that the people, the initial payment was 120 million, will be repatriated back to Africa, wherever they came from. Africa will be the dumping ground, as if we were absolutely awash with money and so on. And Rwanda will take charge of resettling or managing the refugee crisis. Now, you mentioned fetchers of water and hewers of wood. And
yes,
immediately you sparked off this thought in my head of Africa becoming, kind of the refuse dump for what Europe refuses to take responsibility for. Because
yes,
the truth is, Ghana doesn't have a sufficiently extensive foreign policy. Neither do Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia, or anywhere else to actually influence the affairs of foreign countries. But America and the EC do.
yes, they do.
And so, but we are now going to be taking back the detritus, which is the result of usually Western foreign policy.
Yes,
And there is an African who has been persuaded to think that this is a good idea. Riddle me
yeah.
that one. Please square me
It's
that circle. I
it's
may not be
it's
bright enough
curious
to work
that
it out.
this this particular African is also much lauded by the West for apparently bringing his country together and advancing it after many years of civil strife and genocide. There is another side to the story of Rwanda, which is not often told,
Right,
which is to look at those who are responsible for sparking the genocide in the first place,
right.
because many of those are still in government today.
Hmm.
And the second thing that needs to be looked at is the activities of certain elements within Rwanda on cross border programs, where, for
But
example,
within their region, within that region of Africa,
within that region,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
which have a destabilizing effect on other countries. But the conduit for the extraction of very vulnerable minerals and resources by Western interests. So, there's an old saying: anytime an enemy starts praising a friend, you gotta start wondering about the friend,
Mm,
how much of a friend they are.
mm.
But in a sense, Africa has always been the dumping ground for much of what is rejected by the West, whether it's clothing or secondhand vehicles and parts or secondhand ideas and so on. The fact, though, also, when you mentioned the New World Order, and in the same breath we mentioned COVID, we also have to be aware of policies like NSSM 200, which remains in the US statute books or rather, which remains a cornerstone of US foreign policy. NSSM 200 stands for National Security Study Memorandum 200, which was authored by former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger.
My goodness, yes.
And
Yes.
that particular document laid out the template for the US to take
Right.
particular note of population growth and expansion in countries where they deem themselves to have a strategic interest. And that has been a cornerstone for US policy for quite some time. And so when we hear people like Bill Gates and so on start talking about population growth, limiting population growth and depopulating the world because they say there are too many people in the world, we have to understand where that is coming from.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Just the other day, I received a document which asserted that in November 2019, the Department of Defense, the US Department of Defense, paid money to Ukraine Bio Research Establishment to do research into, quote, COVID-19, unquote. This was in November 2019,
It hadn't struck yet.
even before the first instances of COVID were announced in, I think it was December. And then in January or so, the pandemic was announced where COVID-19 was
Broke out
formally,
from Wuhan. Hmm.
you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
So there is documentation, and there's a lot of other documentation, US patents and so on that have been taken out for coronavirus research, this gain of function research that Fauci has been linked to and so on. So we have to entertain the idea, if not the reality, that the COVID was an engineered virus that was engineered to start the process of depopulating this planet. Because, when you mentioned earlier that some people have projected that the GDP of Africa is going to contract by 30%. And you got to ask yourself, these are the same people or other people are projecting that over the same period of time, the population of Africa is going to increase by 30% or more. So how do you square that particular circle?
Okay. Well, Max, by
Saying that
sharing,
that population is going to increase. One of them something has to give.
absolutely. Max, if I may say that by sharing that particular stat, I think that I have just lost one platform that I will be streaming this one on because they'll probably censor it. But please, feel free and share, the insights that you have. I'm the last person to censor anybody. Now, the problem then becomes, when I raise these issues and have conversations with African professionals, their eyes glaze over.
Yes.
Literally, you can see them falling asleep as the conversation gets beyond the third sentence.
Yes.
And it does make you wonder what needs to be done to get Africans, speaking up, thinking about these issues, and then secondarily, speaking up to more than drinking chums in the bar.
Yeah.
What is going to be needed? I have struggled with this for some time, Max. So I'm relying on your infinite resource and sagacity to walk us through this one.
I wish there were an easy answer, Ted, but I really don't see any easy path ahead.
Okay.
Let me relate the story though of a young man in Zimbabwe, yeah, who apparently has been gifted by extraordinary insights and ability, much like Nikola Tesla over 100 years ago. And this young man was reported to have designed an engine that runs on water. Then he was reported to have designed an engine that needs no fuel. Okay. Most recently, he has been reported to have designed a power supply that you can use to power your TV and other devices
Yes. Yes, I saw
without.
that.
Okay. So we have here an example of innovation that he would not be the first person to have come up with what some refer to as 0 point energy
Mm,
devices.
mm,
Okay. And to give some more context to that, let me state an Akan proverb which says that anywhere you have an illness, there also you will find the cure. Okay, it's basically the law of duality,
mm-hmm,
where you have a thesis, you
mm-hmm.
will also have the antithesis if you look carefully enough. And interpreting this on a grand scale, on the biggest scale, my view is that the Creator did not place us here on this planet without giving us everything we need, including access to limitless energy. There have been many people who have come up with technologies that will access limitless energy. Many of these people have disappeared, and or their technologies have disappeared. And the last time I heard about this young guy from Zimbabwe, whose own government didn't take very much interest in the potential of what he was doing, he had been invited over to the US by a group of technologists or something who promised him big money to fund his ideas and all the rest of it. And doubtless they took him there and they debriefed him as to what the fundamental basis of his technologies
Technology
were.
and his ideas were.
And last I heard, this young man had been poisoned and was fighting for his life.
Yes.
Okay. So we have situations like this young man represents, where ideas that can revolutionize the world, can overturn the balance of power in the world, keep coming up from anywhere, whether it's in Africa or Norway or Peru and so on. And the hope we have is that one of these fine days, one of these ideas is going to emerge and is going to take sufficient root in terms of being widely disseminated so enough people know about that it cannot be stopped. And when that happens, then we'll begin to see a shift in the balance of power, where the inequities of the world today, the inequalities where so much wealth is concentrated in a few hands, yeah, begin to break down so that everybody has access to adequate energy and can live their lives without having to depend on big brother or big business to supply their needs.
Well, that's Max. That's brilliant. I mean, you've given me so much food for thought, and when this is streamed out, I'm sure that we're going to get a great response to it. Um, you mentioned kind of a spiritual element to your thinking here.
Yes.
By way of an outline, what part do you think spirituality plays in assisting Africans to confront the challenges that they uh, that they confront? I mean, not in a kind of running away from reality, but in a way of actually forcing Africans to confront their reality, with a view to getting a positive result. Your view?
Spirituality could play and should play a huge role. I mean, the concept of Ubuntu
Yeah.
is perhaps the thing that differentiates Africans from
Other
the
cultures.
from other continents and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we are all in this together.
Mm,
You
mm,
understand? However, spirituality has limited how should I put it, play, okay, when it comes to dealing with the modern world. Because you can be as spiritual as you like, but if somebody, uh, you know, takes an AK-47 and points it at you, you're gone. You're gone. And alongside spirituality, we also have to invoke the use of the mind. The difficulty we have in Africa is that we have concentrated on spirituality at the expense of
To the exclusion
mental,
of.
yeah, you know, at the expense of analysis and synthesis of where we are in this world, what is available to us, and what can we do with it. And we have become very lazy mentally. This is one reason, another reason why we do not progress. You know, but I have some friends who are at the same time highly spiritual, but also recognize the need to engage our minds in forging a way forward for ourselves and for our fellow man.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we have been, our spiritual sides have largely been hijacked by certain elements which purport to be of Christian origin. But really, when I hear what they say and see what they do and how they treat their congregations, I have to conclude that their influence is actually Satanist. And this is
Come
going
on it.
back to this I knew it coeptus thing. They talk
Right.
about in God we trust and so on, but they don't specify which.
Question is, which God?
Yes.
Max, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. Kind of on an editorial basis, I've always felt that human spirituality needs to be connected always to everything that we do because it takes us back to our source. But spirituality won't as such deal with the material world. It has to be, it has to manifest through our thoughts, our words, and
And these.
consequently our actions.
Indeed.
So
I mean, you doubtless be aware that even in the Christian theology,
yes,
there is this idea that Jesus expressed: render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. We make a big mistake in Africa where we try to render unto God everything, including that which is
that
Caesar's.
which
And
belongs to
we
Caesar.
expect God to come and do our work for us. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't
Okay,
work that way.
okay, Max. Look, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and I look forward to having you here again soon.
It's been a
Okay,
pleasure.
thank you. Thanks all.
C'est mon plaisir. Bye for now.